How much do Filipinos actually earn per month? Would $800 be enough for a comfortable life here in the Philippines? Hey there, I'm Götz and I'm glad you're curious about these questions. For over 10 years now, I've been calling Cebu City in the Philippines my home, and ever since I started sharing my life here on YouTube, I often get asked if $800 of pension per month would cut it. But wait, before you go packing your bags, let me offer you a sneak peek into what Filipinos typically earn and whether $800 would put you in the rich club here. Just a heads up, all the figures I'm gonna mention come from various public sources. The data is all from October 2022, since the 2023 numbers aren't out yet. Plus, I converted the peso values to US dollar and used the 2022 50 peso per dollar exchange rate. You can find the links to my sources in the video description, but enough chit chat, let's dive right in. One topic often brought up is the minimum wage in the Philippines. Yes, indeed, the Philippines does have minimum wages. However, these can vary depending on the region and industry. To really get the gist of it, one has to delve into the minimum wage chart. To give you an idea of the range, in the national capital region, that's Manila, the highest industrial minimum wage is at 570 pesos, which is roughly $11.40 per day. But for agriculture, it dips to just 533 peso. That's about $10.66. In contrast, over in the BARMM region, that's the Muslim part of Mindanao, the industrial minimum wage tops out at just 340 pesos a day, and agricultural field workers sometimes only pull in 320 peso. And this is typically for a 6-day work week that can stretch up to 10 hours a day. And since I did touch on this in the Maid in the Philippines video, the monthly minimum wage for a maid in 2022 was set at 5,000 pesos, which is just about $100. Time for some number crunching. Did you know that in 2022 the poverty line in the Philippines was set at 12,030 pesos per month? That's roughly, give or take, 80 pesos a day. Now, to put that in perspective, a worker earning the minimum wage in Manila pockets 570 peso daily. Over a 25-day working month, that's a total of 14,250 peso. That's only just above the poverty line. Over in the Muslim part of Mindanao region, things look a bit bleaker. Here, workers make just 340 pesos a day, which totals up to around 8,500 peso or just $170 for the month. Agricultural workers, same story, a mere 8,000 peso. But let me add a silver lining. Those in official jobs with work contracts are typically entitled to benefits like health insurance, social security and other retirement provisions. And often a bonus 13 months salary is thrown into the mix. So with a work contract, things aren't all doom and gloom. But just to paint a global picture for you all, Western pensions and retirement funds go a long way here. For instance, in the USA, come 2023, the average pension's gonna be around $1,800 a month. That, my friends, translate to a neat 90,000 peso. What about Canada? Now, this might rise an eyebrow or two because the Canadian average pension is just about 775 Canadian dollars, somewhere in the ballpark of $610, which boils down to roughly 38,500 peso. A little side note on Canada, I've stumbled upon numerous sites stating only the maximum Canadian pension being around 1,300 Canadian dollars as the regular number. So word of advice, always double check what information is given online. Now, heading over to Australia, they are looking at about 1,100 Australian dollars, about 825 US dollar, which comes up to around 55,000 pesos. And what's the deal in Germany and Austria? Well, Germans sit at around 1,700 euros, that's 85,000 pesos, and Austria is a bit plusher at 2,600 euros pension a month. That's a cool 130,000 pesos. And let's not forget our Swiss retirees. They are pocketing on average about 2,100 Swiss francs, give or take $2,300, which rounds out to a tidy 115,000 peso. Now that we've waded through that ocean of numbers, one thing stands out pretty clearly. With an average Western pension, your wallet feels a tad chunkier in the Philippines. Mind you, depending on where you hail from, you might not feel like Scrooge McDuck, but you'll certainly notice the difference those living costs here bring along. Which brings us to the million peso questions. Where do you stand with your pension in the Philippines? Are you getting the red carpet treatment everywhere you go? With all this money talk, you might be wondering, where do you fit in the socio-economic ladder and how are social classes defined in the Philippines? The answer is of course layered. Sure, income's a big player, but factors like occupation, education and lifestyle also come into the mix. To keep things from getting too tangled up here, I'm mainly gonna focus on income, and all numbers I mentioned are from end of 2022 with a 50 peso for the dollar exchange rate. So, who's in the elite club, the upper crust? That's families earning over 2 million peso a year. Break that down monthly, you're looking at about 155,000 peso, which is $3,100 a month and up. Always remember 13th month's pay. So, who makes up this well-heeled 2% of the population? Mostly business leaders, then of course the political elite, and those working long time in highly specialized jobs. And here's where it gets a bit touchy. When talking politics, it's hard to skip over corruption. Yep, the Philippines had, or maybe still has, its share of issues in that department. That is why, back in 2019, ex-President Duterte rolled out Executive Order number 201, popularly known as Salary Standardization Law 5. This shook up the pay structure for government employees, from civilians right through to military personnel. On the upside, this made my job now much easier, because now all the figures I'll be talking about in the video for state employees come from this official 2022 salary chart. And for those of you who like to double check, it's all available online. You will find the link, yep, you guessed it, in the video description. So let's kick things off at the top. Ever wondered what the president of the Philippines pocketed in 2022? That figure stood at 415,000 peso a month, which is around $8,300. The vice president not too far behind with a tidy 360,000 peso, that's roughly $7,200. Pretty much neck and neck with the Senate president. Senators and House of Representative members, they are looking at an average of 290,000 peso or about $5,800. Moving a bit down the ladder, we've got provincial governors pulling in around 195,000 peso, $3,900 monthly, with their deputies, the vice governors, at about 155,000 peso, $3,100. And for those of you wondering about city mayors, they are also banking a neat 195,000 peso each month. But before you reckon I'm just on a political spiel, in the healthcare sector, specialists like neurosurgeons and cardiologists are raking in an average of over 170,000 peso, $3,400. Then we have IT pros. A senior project manager can expect around 265,000 peso, $5,300, although that's a bit less than what I was making a decade ago back in Germany. Seasoned IT software developers, they too can jump over the 170 peso mark monthly. From the high flyers, let's step down a notch to the upper middle class. We are talking about families pulling in an annual income of between 1 and 2 million peso. That translates to, bearing in mind a 13-month salary, anywhere from 77,000 to 155,000 peso or 1,500 to $3,500 monthly. So who's mingling in this bracket? You're spot on, many well-off Western retirees fit right in here. But let's start with the politicians. Mayors of what's termed component cities, which are the conglomerates of Manila or Quezon City, these mayors clock in an average of 155,000 peso, $3,100 on their paycheck. Their deputies, the vice mayors, they are not far behind with a cool 120,000 peso, $2,400 monthly. Then over here in the Philippines, there's the Bureau of Corrections. The head of the BOC earns around 85,000 peso, that's $1,700. When you peek at police, military, fire department, coast guard and the likes, you're looking at salaries ranging from 80,000 peso, $1,600 for a colonel rank to a sweet 150,000 peso, $3,000 for the highest general ranks. A fire department chief takes home about 90,000 peso, $1,800, while a fire superintendent is just a tad below that mark with around 85,000 peso, $1,700. Jumping back to the mainstream job market, IT specialists with a few years under their belts can expect anywhere from 75,000 to 170,000 peso, $1,500 to $3,400. Pilots and aviation technicians, they are on the higher end of the pay scale, averaging around 135,000 peso, $2,700. Judges and lawyers are looking at about 90,000 peso, $1,800, while seasoned university and college professors hover around 80,000 peso, $1,600. And then experienced and specialized nurses. They too find themselves in this income bracket, pulling in up to 100,000 peso, $2,000 monthly. From the upper middle class, we slide down to probably the most familiar territory, the middle class. This is where families with an annual income of between 250,000 and 1 million peso hang out. That translates to roughly 20,000 to 70,000 peso monthly, or for those dollar enthusiasts out there, between $500 and about $1,500. Just a little tidbit, I've personally been living on around $1,500 a month over the last years. The middle class covers a broad spectrum of jobs, and to be fair, the lines are kinda blurry at the lower end. Taking a page out of politics, we've got the barangay chief, or Punong Barangay as it's locally called. This local guy has a set salary based on the official table of around 34,000 peso, that's $680. Now, what's intriguing about the presidential salary reshuffle for the police, military and fire brigade is that they're all on the same page. Rookies in the police force, privates in the army, newbie firefighters, coast guard sailors, prison guards, they all kickstart their careers with a paycheck of 29,668 peso, which comes to $593 per month. Climbing up the ranks, for instance, a police captain is looking at 56,582 peso, $1,130, while higher police ranks earn up to 72,000 peso, $1,440. Over in the military, sergeant ranks hover around 34,000 peso, $680. A lieutenant begins at 44,000 peso, $880. A major sits at 62,500 peso, $1,250. And a lieutenant colonel, he gets around 71,300 peso, $1,426. For those riding the waves with the Coast Guard, for example, a first master petty officer earns a solid 38,366 peso, that's about $767. Senior fire officers or senior jail guards are drawing in around 33,400 peso, that's $670, while further higher ranking counterparts can earn between 40,000 and 70,000 peso too, $800 to $1,400. Think of roles like a fire superintendent. Actuaries are on the upper crust, raking in just short of 70,000 peso. Then you've got statisticians, insurance staff and higher up bank employees, all chilling in the ballpark of 50,000 peso, that's about $1,000 a month. A big chunk of the health sector workforce, especially specialized medical pros and general practitioners, is looking at around 55,000 peso, $1,100, and nurses, after clocking in a few years, most find themselves comfortably nested in the middle class. A rookie nurse starts at 32,000 peso, $640, but as mentioned before, with time and experience, they can soar up to a sweet 100,000 peso a month. That's $2,000. Now on to other well-paid gigs. Geologists and miners, especially those diving deep into coal mining, crude oil, natural gas extraction and other quarrying and mining endeavors, geologists pocket about 50,500 peso, around $1,000 a month, while an average miner can pull in up to 43,330 peso, roughly $870. Production managers and general foremen working in electricity, gas, steam and air conditioning, they are pulling in an average of 63,000 peso, that's $1,260. Now the folks working the grind in this industry, they are looking at around 30,670 peso, that's a rough $620 a month. Many seasoned sailors find themselves in the middle class. But a heads up, starting salaries, especially with shipping companies based in the Philippines, can be a tad lean, hovering at just 20,000 peso, $400. However, give it time and these salt-of-the-sea sailors can reel in a solid 60,000 peso, $1,200 on average each month. Diving into the IT realm, rookies typically start between 30 and 50,000 peso, $600 to $1,000, depending on the niche. But as a seasoned developer, the sky's the limit, with salaries soaring to 200,000 peso without a hitch, that's $4,000. Bank managers and credit analysts, they are banking a neat average of 50,700 peso, roughly $1,000 monthly. To wrap up our deep dive into the typical middle class, let's chat about accountants. A typical bean counter in the Philippines pockets around 32,000 peso, $640 each month. But as with most jobs, there's a range. Some are bringing in as low as 13,900 peso, $280, while others are counting a sweet 47,900 peso, $960. Averaging at about 33,600 peso, your typical accountant still earns roughly double than the usual office worker, who's usually sitting around only 60,000 peso a month, that's $320. Here's a fun fact. On the islands, public sector employees generally earn around 12% more than their buddies in the private sector. So while a private sector accountant might be looking at 32,000 peso, their counterpart in the public sector is cashing in a nifty 38,400 peso. Next comes the line between middle and lower middle class, and it gets a tad blurry. Falling into this broad band are families whose annual income sits between 100 and 200,000 pesos, translating to monthly earnings of 7,700 to 20,000 peso, which is about $155 to $400 only. In this bracket, you'll find call center agents just starting out, mostly earning between 20 and 22,000 peso, $400 to $440. Teachers too often start off in this range with an entry salary of around 20,000 peso. And let's not forget about the support and station nurses, earning somewhere between 15,580 and 17,400 peso, which is $310 to $350. Since we all live in barangays here, folks like the barangay secretary, treasurer and other members all pocket the same monthly figure, a tidy 15,000 peso, that's $300. From a bird's eye view, the average monthly wage for simple jobs, think unskilled workers, across all sectors in 2022 was around 12,276 peso, that's just $245. The highest middle base pay in the industry, that went to workers in the National Capital Region, pulling in 16,861 peso, $337. On the flip side, the Zamboanga Peninsula had workers earning the lowest middle base salary, a mere 9,858 peso, that's just $197 per month. And those families in the Philippines raking in less than 100,000 peso, they are usually part of the lower class or disadvantaged group. You can see, even with $800, you are living large in the Philippines. But many Filipinos show us every day that you can get by on much less. The question is, are you game for such a simple and mostly unsecured life? If that sounds like a yes, especially in the provinces, you are looking at a real paradise filled with the warmest folks around. For now though, I'm signing off from the bustling Cebu city. I hope you enjoyed my video. Catch you later. Bye.